I'm Councilor Green, and I'm joined by Councilor Majuk and Councilor Driscoll and Councilor Bay. So Commissioner, I'll turn it over to you. Good hearing.
Good morning, councilors. Our budget this year is basically our attempt to recover from the contingency budget of last year. We're really not asking for very much more as far as new staff members. And most of the rest of the expenses are fairly flat. We don't have a big budget here in assessment. Part of our department's budget is also the budget for the Board of Assessment Review. This year, we were able to save over $2,000 by issuing temporary parking passes for the lot across the street, so that the board members had a place to park while they came to deliberate or they came to hearings. I think for a number of years now, the Board of Assessment Review members have been asking for a raise, but that's up to the council. So we didn't put that in there. Are there any specific questions about the budget?
Commissioner, when was the last time those board members got raised?
It has to be quite a while ago. I'd say almost 20 years ago, probably.
Hey, Commissioner, could you go into a little bit more about? I'm not as familiar as perhaps I should be with the board and what their roles are, and maybe give me a little rundown on
Sure.
More background on them.
Sure. The Board of Assessment Review is a 5-member board that has the ability to review and decrease people's assessments if they file a complaint. The board is appointed by the Common Council. We are actually one board member down at this point in time, so we should think about appointing somebody to fill that vacancy. They get paid $100 a day. They come in usually through the month of February, sometimes into the month of March, depending on how many complaints we have. They sit and listen to people's grievances, and then make a decision as to, the assessed value on the property.
So what is the annual expense for that average usually? Sorry, is it in the book? I should probably just look.
Yeah, I have to look it up myself here. So, just had it here.
It's about $12,000.
Yeah, total.
And the last time they were raised, Commissioner, how much was it?
I think it was $75 a session. I'm not sure. Prior to what they get now, which is $100 a session.
So it was $175 total, or
no, it was. They used to get $75, I think, per session.
Okay, so now
they get $100. Yes.
Okay.
But like I said, we did not budget for an increase. I'm just mentioning what they've told me.
Other questions from other councilors?
Can I go off a little bit, Councilor Green?
Yeah, go ahead.
Commissioner, assessed properties. Could you talk about them a little bit? you know, because I know there's been quite a bit of a topic, but in the past year or so, haven't really heard much about it. So could you?
Yeah, we didn't reassess as many properties. We didn't make as many equalization changes. Those are changes made based just on a change in the value of the property. We didn't do as many of them this year or last year, I mean, 2020, due to the pandemic. We got a late start. But we still are on track to continue to change assessments as the market shows property values are changing. So most of the changes occur in areas where property values are either increasing or decreasing faster than the average property in the city. So that's where we've been targeting our efforts, and we're going to continue to do so.
How often does that happen, Commissioner? Is it that, do you base it on how you say, based on market rate, or is there a set time that you have to do this?
Well, all of our changes have to be done before the end of the year. So as of January 1st each year. So what we do is we analyze the market. We have data that shows us by neighborhood which areas are appreciating, which are depreciating, which are staying flat. So we concentrate on the areas that are changing the most, whether that's increases or decreases. And we go out during the year, and the assessors are out there now doing that, looking at properties and seeing if they're properly assessed based on our most current equalization rate.
Now, I think it was a year or so ago that I read something that Syracuse.com put out, basically saying that that a lot of our low income people pay disproportionately a lot of the taxes. Do you remember that article?
I do painfully remember that article. Here, the problem lies in the fact that what we do as assessors is reactionary. We react to the market. Some areas of the city change faster than others. So it takes us a while to catch up to those changes. Certain areas of the city, some of the better areas of the city actually have appreciated much faster than the average of the city. And as a result, those areas, we're always trying to play catch up. We're always trying to reflect what's happening in the market. And they tend to be underassessed. And these are the wealthier areas of the city. The reverse is true of the less wealthy areas of the city. In those areas, we do try to reflect changes in market value, but they change very little in comparison to the areas that are wealthier, where the real estate market is the hottest, really, is what it comes down to. So when values go up in a specific area, we try to tackle that area to target that area to make those assessments more in line with the rest of the city. The entire city is the base that we use. And New York State tells us each year what our equalization rate is. The equalization rate is essentially the level of assessment in the city of Syracuse. Right now, it's 74.5%. So what that means is we are assessing, houses on average are assessed at 74.5% of their market value in the city of Syracuse right now, according to New York State. That's using their formulas and their ways of figuring out the equalization rate. Each year we get a new equalization rate, and our equalization rate has been dropping. What that primarily suggests is that overall values are appreciating in the city of Syracuse. Market values of properties are going up. Since we've done the reval, which was like 26 years ago, we've dropped about a percentage point a year. It's about what it averages out to.
So based on what you just said, how does that help the problem in terms of having people who are doing a little bit better pay a little bit more, pay their fair share? How does that help us?
Well, our whole job is to spread the tax burden as fairly as possible. And the way we do that is to try to have as accurate an assessment on every single house in the city as we can. There's like 43,000 properties in the city of Syracuse. Maybe less now because there's been a lot of combines, but we can't get out and look at every single property every year. To look at every single property in a year would be doing a revaluation. And if the equalization rate drops enough, it warrants spending the money to do a revaluation.
So you're saying that the commissioner that those that are low income are stuck with what they are paying currently, and the other one are stuck with what they are paying. Is that what I'm hearing?
No. We look at properties in low income areas as well, and if they are overassessed, we reduce them. We make reductions every year, just like we make increases. There tend to be more increases than reductions. There's more properties appreciating than there are properties, depreciating in value.
Commissioner, just to build off of Councilman Drip's question, so I know that when we looked at this full citywide revaluation in the past, it was about $2 million just to do that. Is that still accurate? And is there, other than a budgetary reason to not spend that money, is there any other reason why we wouldn't want to do that?
No, as a matter of fact, that's the main reason, is that we, through this administration and the past administration, funds have been pretty scarce. So, but that could change with the federal aid that we're getting, with the economy improving. It's very possible that we might have the funds to do a revaluation in the near future.
And is the $2 million number still the ballpark, you think?
It's a ballpark. Yeah, and that was a quote I got probably 6 or 7 years ago. So it might be out of date now. I can look into that and see what the newest. Most of the time it's contracted out. So you hire a firm, a revaluation firm, to do a revaluation of the entire city. They have to go out and visit every single property. They have to look at it, check our inventory, make sure it matches, and then they can value the properties. It's possible to do it in-house, but we obviously would have to almost double our staff to do that.
And is there possible to do some kind of combination where you would say, all right, any property that's been reevaluated in the last 5 years, doesn't need to be part of the scope, but every property that has been longer than that, I mean, are there other ways to do it like that? When
you do a revaluation, New York State says you have to go out and look at every single property. The idea is you're doing it as of one date. So everything is done in 1 year so that it can all be the same. Things may have changed in the last year or so. So the way the state looks at it, you have to visit every single property, and the best way to evidence that is to take a picture of it. So we would be having someone or maybe somebody on staff would go out and photograph every single property in the city, and then use the information that we've got once it's verified to value each individual property.
And is there, I know there's been talk about this, but technology wise, I mean, is there drones that do that pictures? I mean, how is this advanced?
Well, yes, there is a lot of great technology out there. We've been investigating some of that technology. We have something called pictometry, which is used on the county's website. Very good technology. They have means that we could look into that show changes from one year to the next of every property from a view from above. So if somebody has put on a porch on the back of their house and never took out a permit and we didn't know about it, sometimes we can determine that using these aerial photographs. There's technology that has a street view, kind of like Google Street View. That's more and more people are trying to figure out ways to be able to value properties remotely without visiting the property. I've never felt that was the best approach due to the fact that when you're actually at a property and looking at it, you notice a lot more things than just a photograph can tell you. And our assessors are trained to look for those things. And all those things are part of coming up with the value of the property.
Councilor Green, if I could.
Okay.
Commissioner, I'm just kind of sitting here thinking, I just want to throw out a question, maybe a hypothetical. When I look at just thinking about the state equalization rate and the process, how it works, I'm just asking, just let's just say for kicks and giggles. When we know it's how it's always been done. This equalization rate, as you said, is determined or communicated to us every year, and this is per municipality, right?
Yes.
Just asking, and it's based on property value, and not to try to make everybody bust any brain vessels here, but I'm certainly learning alongside. How is the property value determined in short order?
Well, we determine individual property values using the 3 accepted approaches to determining value. They would be the sales comparison approach, where you look at sales of similar properties and compare them to the subject property. The income approach, where you capitalize the net income of a property using an appropriate rate. And the cost approach, where you figure out the cost to rebuild something new and depreciate it based on the factors that cause depreciation. So those are the 3 methods that we utilized to value property. We have in our office, most of the people that have gone out there, actually all of them, are trained to use these approaches, these accepted approaches, and determine the market value of each individual property. New York State collectively takes certain classes of property. For example, residential properties are one class, commercial properties are another class, vacant land is another class, and they figure out the rate, the level of assessment for each of those, and they blend them together to come up with the equalization rate. I can't hear you.
Councilor Bay,
Yeah, I don't know who muted me, but Jim, what are you doing? Listening to Councilor Majoke's question and Councilor Green's follow-up, and I just look at, I'm sure not the only person on the planet ever considered the sustainability of our state's process of assessment and/or equalization in comparison to any respective city's median income. And when there's always obviously the effort on the part of government, and this is what I mean about the point of their question, to find a true balance and share of liability, right? And ensure that people can live sustainable lives. But it seems, and this is of course not to you, Commissioner, but it just seems that when we look at government as a living animal that's continually improving, it seems that we can probably use some improvement there, that we can potentially find or consider another formula that is more sustainable, where people can actually experience a fair share of tax payment and the like. And then I'll end here, Commissioner. I'm just kind of, this is why I said for kicks and giggles. But it just seems that I don't know how the median income of a municipality is not considered there. Go ahead.
Well, unfortunately, the property tax, which is it started in the Middle Ages. It's
Right.
back when wealth was measured in land. So the more land you owned, the more wealthy you were. It wasn't how much money you had, it was how much land you had, which
Right.
could produce income. The property tax has been around for a long time. It is a regressive tax. It does not take into account people's income, unless we're talking about certain exemptions, senior citizen exemption, disability exemption, and so on. But for the most part, it says if you've got $100,000 house, you pay what the next guy who has a $100,000 house. It has no bearing on your income in its current form.
Right. That's understood. I think when we consider, to the point of Councilor Majoke's question, this is where it gets a little murky, and where I think even a layman oftentimes gets confused about what's in fact the fair share of payment versus maybe what many people may consider not, who's capable of paying. The value of some property is outpacing people's income. It always has, and this is why I question its sustainability. Obviously, we've been around a long time, but we live in a society of debt and service, as opposed to true efforts to improve wealth. So, just kind of thinking here and throwing something out for people to consider. And maybe it's a later discussion for our state delegates, but
I think you're right. There may be ways to improve the property tax system. The benefits of the property tax system is, for one thing, it's one of the only sources of revenue that the municipality has some sort of control over.
Right.
For another thing, it's theoretically, if you look at it from a market value standpoint, it's equitable in that respect. If you own a mansion, you sort of should pay taxes on a mansion. But once again, it does not take into account a person's ability to pay, and some of the worst situations I've had to deal with is people who've a spouse dies and the widow is left with a house that she can't afford anymore, and it's a very it's a sad situation, but that's the law as it exists in New York State right now.
Yeah, that's exactly part of the point of my discussion. I always make reference to seniors and persons who are living with disabilities, living on fixed incomes, and the market outpaces them, and they end up, in foreclosure, and the land bank seizes their property. And sometimes, these people are, we shouldn't be sending senior citizens into bouts of stress leading to cardiac arrest and that kind of thing because they're losing a house they've had for over 30 years, 40 years. So it's a tough thing that I think we probably can do better with. That's obviously not the intent of this conversation to figure that out. But just
we do offer exemptions for senior citizens and for people with disabilities. The exemptions, depending on their income, can be up to 50% off. So it's a pretty powerful exemption, but it's income based. But yeah, there's some people who, they own a house that they can't afford to live in anymore. as property values change. We see that even in towns like Skaneateles along the lake. You know, families who've owned properties for 100 years have to sell their property because they just can't afford the taxes anymore. The values have gone up so quickly there. You know, we don't have that problem in the city of Syracuse yet, but it's still that's what creates these kind of inequities based on people's income.
I appreciate it, Commissioner. Thanks, Councilor Green.
Other questions?
So, Commissioner, did you say, I thought I caught you saying it that there's 42% of assessed properties? Was that? So exempt properties versus,
No, we right now, more than half of the taxable value in the city of Syracuse is exempt. That's due to the fact that we have so many government buildings, universities, parks, schools, you know, all these exempt properties that the rest of us who pay our taxes have to make up for.
A4, right.
what's the exact percentage?
It's about 52%. I could figure it out.
That is of the exempt properties, right?
Yeah, 52% that are not
53,
paying.
That are exempt, yeah, so there's
Okay.
more than half.
But that leaves only 48% of the properties that
pay.
pay.
And it's
Okay.
not the number of properties, it's the value of properties. So for example, Syracuse University is one of the largest property owners in the city as far as market, the value of what they own, because they have vast campuses. If you went by the number of properties, it's not that's not the issue. The issue really is the part of the taxable value. How much of the total value of the city is exempted, and that's about 52%, which is exempt.
Some of our most valuable parcels are not generating revenue.
Correct.
Right.
If I could ask a couple of questions, Commissioner. So
Sure.
anecdotally, I'm sure, like when I talk to people, so I guess first question would be, so you said we're estimating that we're around, what was it, 76% of New York State estimates we're at 76% of our full value. Should we reevaluate?
74.5, yeah.
Okay. So kind of the assumption there would be if we were to do a reval, we would be taking in 25% more revenue. Would that be correct?
No, it's revenue neutral. All it would do is bring the assessments up to 100%. All we do is we take whatever is decided for the budget, for example, what the levy is, and we spread it out as equitably as possible based on the real property tax law, which says it's based on the market value of the property.
Okay.
Taking into account all the exemptions.
Okay, gotcha. So has there ever been a, you know, when it comes to reassessment, has there ever been any, you know, anecdotally, I've had constituents tell me, oh, if we get reassessed, we might think about, you know, moving out of the city. Those kind of conversations when people are, you know, people who are in properties that are currently undervalued. Has there ever been any data that you're aware of that, you know, I highly doubt that most of those people would. I think it's something people say, but I was just curious if there was ever any study or data to show, you know, that assessments can affect that kind of activity.
They can, but I mean, when we did our revaluation back in 1995 or so, the average change in taxes, the average increase on a tax bill was like $700 or $800. So it was a significant change because there were a lot of underassessed residential properties. What had happened in the past was that traditionally and historically, commercial properties had been generally overassessed and residential properties had been underassessed. And I think that would be one of the problems with selling a revaluation at this point in time. A lot of people remember that. They remember the big increase in taxes that resulted from the last revaluation. That type of increase would not happen. There might be increases to a lot of properties, but they would be much smaller than, because we've been trying to keep commercial property assessments as fair as possible, as well as residential. So there's no, big divide there like there used to be before we did the reval. So there wouldn't be a big shift of tax burden from one class to another like there was the last time.
Gotcha.
I guess this question is for maybe Director Rudd. So out of that 48%, what was the projected revenue and actual?
How much money do we collect on property taxes?
Yeah, how much was projected and how much actually came in?
The Commissioner of Finance tells me we collect 97% of what we aim to collect in the year. It's like 38 million for city and 66 million for school district. So we're collecting 105 million of property taxes within the city property. So if all 42,000 parcels were assessed the same, everybody would pay $2,500. So it's really about your relative assessment to the other properties in the community. If we assessed everybody at $1 and then it's assessed a rate, it's about the relative distribution that we then collect $105 million for city and school. Does that seem reasonable, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, obviously every single property has a different value. So we have to assess them based on the law. We have to assess them based on that value.
Right. I'm not saying we would do that, but if that just gives you a baseline of what it would be if every property were equal. And then from there, you're going to have variations. So some are going to pay 5 times that, some are going to pay half that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. All right, well, thank you very much. We'll close the hearing.
Thank you.